Guys, there is a new version of NoiseXterminator that has become available. It is NoiseXterminator AI version 3, and it is available free of charge if you've already bought that plugin. If you don't know what NoiseXterminator is, or if you're not familiar with it, it is a plugin for PixInsight, and PixInsight itself is like what I consider to be the reference in astrophotography processing software. And NoiseXterminator costs $60 to purchase. That's on top, of course, of the PixInsight license, which is €300. Sounds like a lot of money, and it is a lot of money, but to me, PixInsight and NoiseXterminator, as well as other tools by the same author, have been worth every penny and more. They've served me through many years. They're amazing tools. And if you were ever to contemplate buying like a new filter, maybe you're hesitating between a new narrowband filter or a new Astro camera, even though you have a rig that already works, I would suggest to actually forget about both of those and buy PixInsight, NoiseXterminator, BlurXterminator, StarXterminator instead. All of those three are plugins for PixInsight. Anyway, if you're ever interested in getting NoiseXterminator, it's available on the NoiseXterminator website. I'll have the link down in the description. I unfortunately do not have affiliate links for that, so it's just NoiseXterminator. And it does require PixInsight to run, which you can buy at this website. Again, I'll have the links down in the description. So in this video, I want to take NoiseXterminator AI version 3 and compare it with GraXpert Denoise, which I had felt recently was a free alternative to NoiseXterminator that in a lot of cases actually performed better, giving a smoother image with as much details in the image. And so obviously it was time for NoiseXterminator to actually react to that, because how can a $60 plugin that relies on the €300 software compete with a free denoising software that does not require any additional software to run? And so I took NoiseXterminator AI version 3 and I compared it to GraXpert Denoise on a couple of images at the linear stage of the image, basically straight out of camera after stacking, and also after stretching the image so that it becomes kind of like visible and understandable by our human eyes. And I've compared the two in both stages to see, not only how well NoiseXterminator version 3 performs, but also when in the workflow you should be using it. Because up to now, I have always used NoiseXterminator at the linear level, so straight out of camera after stacking all of the images, but maybe I should change that to using it after stretching. We'll see exactly what happens in this video, so stay tuned. Anyway, here I have my computer. Before we go into the details of all of those images there that I have on the screen, if you want to use NoiseXterminator AI version 3, make sure that under Resources, Updates, Manage Repositories, you have the RC Astro NoiseXterminator line here. So this is all explained on the RC Astro website if you buy NoiseXterminator. If you also have an NVIDIA GPU like I do, you would want to also make sure you have this one installed so that you can have GPU acceleration for NoiseXterminator. And so it runs much faster in that case. Once you have that, you'll want to go to Resources, Updates, check for updates, and that will let you download and install the latest version of NoiseXterminator. Afterwards, once you run NoiseXterminator, and of course if you're installing from scratch, you'll need to set up your license key in the wrench icon here. But once it's done, you may have basically AI version 2 selected, but you can see there's a bit of text here that tells me like, hey, AI version 3 is available. Please click to select. So yes, let's do exactly that. I'm going to click on Select AI, and we're going to select NoiseXterminator 3.pb. And there it is. It is selected. We're using now NoiseXterminator version 3. So let me show you how I've been playing with NoiseXterminator. We have here data on the Jellyfish Nebula that I took not so long ago with an SQA55 refracting telescope, a QHY Minicam 8 with its integrated narrowband filters, and then it was mounted on an AM5N, and all of that controlled by Nina. And we end up with roughly 60 exposures of 5 seconds each for each channel for oxygen 3 for H-alpha and for sulfur 2 here. So what we see here is on the very left, the first row is oxygen 3, H-alpha, sulfur 2 without any noise reduction. Then here we have, again, oxygen 3, H-alpha, sulfur 2, but with GraXpert denoised applied. And then on the right, we have NoiseXterminator version 3 applied on oxygen 3, H-alpha, and sulfur 2. So as you know, I have run all of those on these images. One thing to note from the get-go, without even looking at the results, is that at least for my setup, which includes an NVIDIA GPU, running NoiseXterminator version 3 took maybe 5 seconds on each of those images, whereas running GraXpert took roughly 12 minutes to run on each of the images with their latest AI. So that's what, 140 times, something like that, slower to run GraXpert than NoiseXterminator. And yes, I have the GPU acceleration enabled. Hopefully it's working, but I saw a huge difference in processing time. I'm used to GraXpert taking a long time and to NoiseXterminator being very, very fast. Anyway, I think one of the images that is where it's the most obvious is the oxygen 3 image, because that's where we have the worst signal to noise ratio. And if I zoom in, if you look at the image on the left, this is the original stack. You can see there's a lot of noise. It's a very noisy image. And if you look on the at the image in the middle, this is GraXpert denoise, so entirely free. Can be used standalone, does not require PixInsight. It's already an excellent result that we get. We do get some kind of stars that get imagined. Like if you look there, you have those little white dots that seem to be hallucinated basically by GraXpert denoise. I don't see such stars in the initial data, but GraXpert denoise has basically just invented stars there, but I can forgive it because it is giving us a really good result there in terms of smoothing out the noise for something that's free. Even if it takes a long time to run, it's performing very, very well. Although it is indeed, and we can see it like here, those 4 little dots there, inventing stars. And yes, if you compare to images on the Hubble, those stars are indeed hallucinations. And then we can go on the right hand side to NoiseXterminator with AI version 3. And I think NoiseXterminator with AI version 3 is clearly performing better than GraXpert, which is no slouch already. And it hallucinates much fewer stars, if any. It seems to have a very good way of distinguishing between what is signal and what is noise. And this here, it's a very good example where you can look at the center of that little detail of that little region here. And it's very noisy. It's almost as if like GraXpert was trying to find details in there. That NoiseXterminator version 3 is like, yeah, no, it's just like, let's just smooth things out. Let's not try too much, right? And so overall, it's a very, very good result that I can see at the linear stage. I mean, to me, it's like almost nothing short of a miracle that we have such tools available to go from what we have on the left here to what we have in the middle, and then furthermore on the right. Absolutely amazing job by NoiseXterminator there, but also very much so by GraXpert. By the way, I've also compared NoiseXterminator version 3 to NoiseXterminator version 2 on the left. You have NoiseXterminator version 3. On the right, you have NoiseXterminator version 2 using the settings that I feel are the best for this particular image. And we can see that indeed, if you compare the two, there is, it is obvious that NoiseXterminator version 3 on the left performs much better than NoiseXterminator version 2 on the right. It is a massive, massive difference. And this difference holds up for every single image that I have tested it on. NoiseXterminator version 3 is a huge upgrade to an already very good product, but at the same time I think it was necessary due to the competition in the free tools space. By the way, if we look at H-alpha, the story is very, very similar. We can zoom into this area. On the left, we have like the stack basically straight out of the camera. In the middle, we have GraXpert. And on the right, we have a NoiseXterminator version 3. And we can see pretty much the same thing. GraXpert does an excellent job overall. especially since it has access to better signal-to-noise ratio in the first place. But I do feel that it's not just a feeling, actually measurably, NoiseXterminator version 3 does even better than GraXpert. You can see in those areas there we still have like a lot of mottling, a lot of noise with GraXpert. Again, using the settings that I feel work best for my images, whereas if you compare that in NoiseXterminator version 3, that noise is not there. It's overall extremely impressive for every single solution there. And we see very much the same thing for Sulfur 2. So again, from left to right, this is Sulfur 2. We have the original image without noise reduction. In the middle, GraXpert. And on the right-hand side, NoiseXterminator version 3. And I think the same conclusions, just as before, can be seen. GraXpert does a great job. It does invent some stars that don't actually exist in reality. And then NoiseXterminator is much better in that respect, while at the same time, if you look at the lower signal-to-noise ratio areas, like this dark area in the middle, smoothing it out better than GraXpert does. So it's really a complete win for NoiseXterminator in those individual monochrome channels that I have taken. But now I want to show you something else, which is looking at this nebula here. You can see a high level of stretch, just so that you can see what's happening, where I did different things. I applied GraXpert and NoiseXterminator on each of the channels separately at the linear stage. Then I stretched that and I combined the channel. This is the result of the combination with GraXpert on the left and NoiseXterminator version 3 on the right. And I also did something else. I did no noise reduction on each of the channels. So I used the images on the left here without any noise reduction. I stretched them, I combined them, and then I applied GraXpert and NoiseXterminator version 3 so we can compare them. Because I wanted to see at which point in the process it is better to use NoiseXterminator version 3, and also at which point in the process it is better to use GraXpert, because I haven't really done that experiment before. And in an awesome video by Adam Block, where he has the creator of NoiseXterminator for an interview, Russ Croman, so I really suggest watching that video. I'll put the link up above and down in the description. Russ mentioned that basically anyway, NoiseXterminator works on stretched data, so in the background it stretches your image and then puts it back to linear if it needs to do so. So let's look a bit at GraXpert linear stage compared to GraXpert at the stretched stage, just to have a quick look. On the left, we have the result of GraXpert applied after stretching of the image. On the right, we have the result of GraXpert applied on each of the individual channels at the linear stage before merging the channels together. And I think that it is very clear that GraXpert, when done on the stretched stage after the combination, did not perform as well as GraXpert when it's done in the linear stage. You can see there is much more noise that's left over in those darker areas of the nebula. And also I see a lot more, like in this area here, for instance, I see a lot of mottling on GraXpert applied at the linear stage compared to GraXpert applied at the stretched stage. So it seems like there's not, it's like give and take, right? The stretching and then applying GraXpert seems to smooth out the noise less, but at the same time it seems to avoid some weird mottling on the details of the nebula. Like this is pretty ugly on the right-hand side image, which is GraXpert applied at the linear stage on each of the individual channels compared to on the left-hand side. So it's kind of like a pick your poison type of situation. But I find that very interesting to look at. I would not say there's a clear winner between those two methods of using GraXpert. So what about NoiseXterminator AI version 3? On the left-hand side, we have NoiseXterminator applied after stretching each channel and combining them. And on the right-hand side, we have NoiseXterminator v3 applied on each individual channels. The channels are combined afterwards, and we look at the difference. And looking at the image, it's very difficult for me to see any real difference between the two. I would say, though, that it seems to me that on this image on the left, there is more detail in this area here than there is on the right-hand side. There's a fairly large difference between the two, and I do feel that the image on the left is actually slightly better than the image on the right. It seems to have maintained better details overall in terms of methodology. And in these areas here as well, it feels like the color noise is more controlled on the left image, which is applying NoiseXterminator after stretching, than it is on the right image, which is applied to each channel before stretching. And besides this difference, the processing of those two images is exactly the same. So it does seem like NoiseXterminator version 3 basically seems to be preferred, maybe, to be used, at least for this kind of monochrome images, after combination and potentially even after stretching, although the difference is quite small. And I think this is basically due to the fact that in the background, I used it with some default settings. I actually used it with the defaults here, 0.9, but you can select how much you want to denoise, like the color noise versus the luminance noise, effectively. And you can also separate by frequency. Basically, do you want to affect the high frequency noise, which is really the grain that you have in the image, or you want to get rid of some overall larger scale mottling that you have in the image. And all of that is kind of like taken care of automatically by the AI if you don't try to do those changes. But otherwise, you can really control that very, very sharply. And you can also have access to a preview to see exactly what's going to happen to your image once you use all of those parameters. I don't believe that the preview was available with NoiseXterminator v2. Maybe I'm crazy, maybe it was and I just never noticed. But you can definitely play around with those parameters. And I highly, again, recommend watching Adam Block's video that I linked to earlier in the video, because they go in a lot more detail. And for me, I wasn't able to use those sliders in a way that actually made it better than the default settings. So I don't really want to go into it in this video because I just feel I wouldn't be adding anything to that. And the video with Adam and Russ doing that directly is much better than anything I could do on the topic. I went with just the default settings, but even though it's clear that NoiseXterminator v3 seems to be taking advantage of the color information it gets in the image, the more information it has, the better. And by the way, if we look at these images with the GraXpert linear, GraXpert stretched, NoiseXterminator applied in the linear stage, NoiseXterminator applied at the stretch stage, we can still see that there is a distinct advantage to NoiseXterminator regardless of how you applied it. Although, as I mentioned, I think these days it should probably be applied at least after channel combination and maybe even after stretching. Definitely a large difference between the images on the left and the images on the right, and I would say the best one is the image on the bottom right. And if you zoom out completely, it's not so visible, but that's because, I have the images small, and overall it does make a difference in the end. Whether you want to pay more for it is something else. That said, I have a second image to show you, which is my usual test on the Pleiades. So let's look at those details on an image that was taken with a one-shot color camera rather than a monochrome camera. We'll do exactly the same test, except that now we're not doing everything channel per channel. But before we do that, don't forget that those videos are a lot of work, and if you want to help support me, you can just like the video. It takes 1 second, it makes a big difference. You can leave a comment to let us know what you think of GraXpert, NoiseXterminator. There's also Cosmic Clarity, Deep SNR, all of those cool stuff that are on the scene. Let us know down in the comments. And if you want to support the channel even more at no cost to you, and you're planning on buying anything from Agena, First Light Optics, High Point Scientific, etc., or even Amazon for that matter, if you do so after clicking one of the links I have down in the description, it will help me out, again, at no cost to you. If you want to sponsor the channel directly and make all of those videos possible, you can become a channel sponsor effectively by becoming a member on YouTube. That's the join button next to the subscribe button, or by joining my Patreon. The link is down in the description. Some ranks of my Patreon have access to my videos early and without ads. So guys, you know it. You make everything possible. Thank you so much for your support. With that, let's keep going on the Pleiades. Okay, so here we have the Pleiades with the image on the left is straight out of stack, no noise reduction of any kind. This is just the good old Pleiades as is. And then on the left-hand side, we have NoiseXterminator on the left side of things. That has been, of course, version 3, and it's applied at the linear stage at the top for NoiseXterminator on the left, and for GraXpert, again, applied at the linear stage on the top with GraXpert. So let's compare those two. So this is a linear stage of the image. We haven't actually stretched the image yet. This is just a screen transfer function. On the left, we have NoiseXterminator version 3. On the right, we have GraXpert. And at first glance, honestly, the difference between the two is not so obvious. I mean, I couldn't say like immediately that one is definitely better than the other. This is a very strong showing for both NoiseXterminator and for GraXpert, which is, again, entirely free. That said, if we do pixel peep, which can be important if you're going to crop on the image, that kind of stuff, we do see, again, that it does seem like NoiseXterminator version 3 has the advantage, especially in those darker areas there. We can see that on the GraXpert, the noise, we still have quite a bit of mottling noise kind of stuff, whereas on NoiseXterminator, we don't. And we can also see at the same time a difference in philosophy, I think, of the two software. If you look in this area here, which corresponds to this in NoiseXterminator, and you compare it to that, which is the original image doesn't, has definitely some dot here, right, that is represented here by what appears to be a nebulosity element. But for GraXpert, it is a star rather than a nebulosity element. And I do feel that in terms of the details that are kept, so I think it's a very interesting comparison. The difference, though, is quite subtle. And if you are to use, GraXpert, the noise, you'd be very, very happy. Although once we go into the lower signal-to-noise ratio areas, we see something quite interesting. And this is where NoiseXterminator at the linear stage breaks down a little bit compared even to GraXpert. GraXpert has some phantom stars. We can see them just like before, phantom stars, which are not great. And we can see the noise in GraXpert, but in NoiseXterminator, we can see some weird transition from dark areas there to brighter areas that are a bit abrupt. It's almost as if we have lost some bit depth in a way where we don't have enough data to analyze the image. And I suspect it has to do with NoiseXterminator stretching and then unstretching the image. And again here, I think NoiseXterminator is doing a great job at removing the noise, but you can see the result on GraXpert. The noise, at least in the linear stage, is much more natural than those weird abrupt variations that you can see here, that we can see with NoiseXterminator. So in some aspects, GraXpert, at least at the linear stage, seems to be superior to NoiseXterminator at the linear stage. But again, we saw with the Jellyfish Nebula that it seems that NoiseXterminator version 3 might prefer to be used after stretching rather than before stretching. Whereas for GraXpert, it seems to be a like choose your poison type of situation. So let's compare those two, but when used not at the linear stage, but after stretching the image. Again, we have on the left side of the image NoiseXterminator, GraXpert on the right side, and this is where we stretched the image first and then applied respectively GraXpert and NoiseXterminator. And I have added a stretch function that is very aggressive just so we can see exactly what's going on here between the two. And first, I wanted to immediately go to those same problematic areas that we had identified with NoiseXterminator when done on unstretched data. And we can see that immediately when it's applied on stretched data, this issue, this like low bit depth type of issue does not occur whatsoever. We also see something very interesting. I'm showing you now the original image on the left with all of the noise, is that NoiseXterminator considered this area, for instance, to be somewhat a little bit of nebulosity, with some elements in there might not be stars, but nebulosity, and so it represents it as such here. Compared to GraXpert, where this same area, which is here, is just stars and nebulosity. And I think actually GraXpert might have done a more natural job on that. So GraXpert still has some advantages there, even on the stretched data. That said, in the other areas, if you don't really pay too much attention to that element of the image, the result of NoiseXterminator is definitely much better, much smoother, definitely less noise, and this is an image that I'll be able to push much more than the GraXpert one. By the way, another philosophy difference, I guess, between the algorithms is that we have this weird little loop here on the original image. GraXpert decided it was 2 stars. NoiseXterminator decided it was an actual nebula feature. There's no way of knowing, so they do their best, right? It's just a different way of looking at the same data, and I find it fascinating that we have this kind of stuff going on in this image. But anyway, we can see that overall, I think GraXpert in terms of, I mean, it's a free solution, does an excellent job, but in terms of actual smoothing the noise, and let's look at more high signal to noise ratio areas, I do feel like if you look at here compared to there, GraXpert has managed to maintain more contrast, more details, while smoothing out more noise. And so it seems to be working very, very well, even though GraXpert is also doing, obviously, an excellent job. I do think that overall, NoiseXterminator version 3 has the upper hand, but if we can see again, there's a difference here in philosophy between the way that NoiseXterminator operates compared to the way that GraXpert operates. In some instances, while this might actually feel more like something that as a human I might have done based on the raw data, it feels in some instances that the GraXpert result is simply more natural. Looking at that little cross there, looks more natural on GraXpert compared to NoiseXterminator that tried to keep as much detail as possible. At the same time, again, NoiseXterminator seems to be doing a much better job at smoothing out the noise. So overall, NoiseXterminator version 3 is definitely an upgrade over NoiseXterminator version 2, and it will let you push the image much more when you look into the low signal to noise data areas, although you do want to use NoiseXterminator version 3 after stretch from what I'm seeing. And there are some debatable kind of decisions that NoiseXterminator is taking. Like we can see GraXpert on the right, NoiseXterminator on the left. We see a lot of patterns there for NoiseXterminator, whereas GraXpert decided no, these are not patterns, they're just let's forget about them, and they become stars. Which is right? We're not sure. I'm not sure. We need to really have to compare Hubble image, that kind of stuff. But it does feel like the GraXpert result is a bit more natural than the NoiseXterminator result, even though NoiseXterminator reduces the noise a lot more. So that's a very, I think, interesting result there. NoiseXterminator version 3, definitely give it a try. But at the same time, if you don't have PixInsight, or you do have PixInsight but you do not have NoiseXterminator, GraXpert can still do an amazing job. The only issue that I have with GraXpert is that with the latest AI, it takes forever to process the image. Those are not large images. One sensor is the 585, the other sensor is the 533. They're 10 megapixels, something like that. So it's not a lot of data. The data is not drizzled, or it was drizzled, it was already resampled. So it's not a lot of data to work on. And yet, GraXpert took 12 minutes each time compared to NoiseXterminator, which is 5 seconds, which, I prefer to take just 5 seconds. So that's something to keep in mind. But what are your thoughts on this? I think we've looked at the pros and cons of each, and at the same time we've looked at how version 3 has really, in a lot of respects, caught up and actually made it better than GraXpert. While there are some other areas that might be debatable, let me know down in the comments which one would you use, what do you think of all of that. I'd love to hear your thoughts. While you're in there, please like the video. Again, if you want to support the channel at no cost to you and you're planning on buying anything from Agena, Amazon, HighPoint, First Light, etc. If you do so after clicking the links that I have in the description, it helps me out at no cost to you. And if you want to sponsor the channel directly, you can become a Patreon member. The link is down in the description, or you can join the channel as a member. It's the join button next to the subscribe button. And of course, we'll have at the end of the video the list of credits together with the final processed image of the Jellyfish Nebula that will be slowly zoomed in, so stay tuned if you do not want to miss that. With that, thank you so much for watching. I hope this was interesting and useful. Don't forget, whenever you can, to look up at the stars, and I'll see you next time.